Okay, this is the free response portion of the polynomial quiz from class yesterday. So let's talk about what we should have done to get all the points. There were 11 total points. There were 2 points for this first one here. Okay, so we're looking for a synthetic division, right? When the function is divided by x plus 2, the remainder is 3. Okay, so we're going to synthetically divide. So negative 2 goes on the outside because you solve this, right? Negative 2 plus 2 equals 0. And then we use the coefficients in order to make your synthetic division. So we have a 3x squared and a minus 2x, and then kx there, and a minus 3. So those are your coefficients. So that's what goes into your synthetic division. Okay, and then we of course perform all of these synthetic division duties as we are supposed to. Negative 2 times 8 is 16. Okay, so this is a k plus 16. Right, we are adding when you do things vertically in synthetic division, k plus 16. And now we're going to multiply both of these things times negative 2. So that's negative 2k minus 32. Because we have to distribute the negative 2 into both of those terms. So then when we add again, we get negative 2k minus 35. Okay, and this is in the remainder spot. So we need to set the remainder equal to 3 because it says the remainder is 3. Okay, so you got 1 point for showing me that the remainder from your synthetic division equals 3. Right? That is the conceptual understanding that you set the remainder equal to whatever it says the remainder is going to be. And then, of course, we simply solve by doing some easy algebra. Negative 2k equals 38. So k equals negative 19. So you got 1 point for setting it equal to 3. And you got 1 point for the answer. Okay, so those are your 2 points. Number 2, what value of k makes this a factor? So once again, this is a 2-point problem. Now we have a 1 on the outside, and we want to figure out what k value makes it a factor. So we're using the same numbers as before, but for it to be a factor, that means whatever equation we get right here needs to be equal to 0. If it's a factor, then the remainder is 0. So we're going to do synthetic division again with this one. And this is your k plus 1. K plus 1 is what we get here. So k plus 1 goes up there, so we get k minus 2. So you got 1 point for setting k minus 2 equal to 0. Explicitly saying that if that's going to be a factor, then the remainder needs to be 0. And you get 1 point for saying that the k value needs to be 2. So if you don't set this equal, explicitly writing this step in here, you don't get the point. But if you solved it somehow magically, then you do get the point from that. Same thing up here. If you didn't explicitly set it equal to 3, then you didn't get the point for the conceptual understanding. But you did for the algebra. Okay, now it says g has a 0 at 2 with a multiplicity of 1. So we are going to synthetically divide with positive 2 and see what the answer is. So our, let's see, we have a 2x cubed and a minus 9x squared and a plus 7x and a plus 6. So we should be expecting to get a 0 remainder, and that's exactly what we get. Okay? So you got 1 point for doing this and getting a remainder of 0. Now these 3 terms here represent the coefficients of a quadratic. 2x squared minus 5x minus 3. Okay, I gave you a point for recognizing that your 3 terms there represent the coefficients of a quadratic. So our job here is to factor this quadratic. And there are lots of ways that we can factor a quadratic with a leading coefficient. Okay, one of them is the AC method, where we multiply 2 times -3 on top and get a -6. And we're looking for numbers that add to give you -5. Hopefully you know those numbers are -6 and 1. -6 times 1 is -6. -6 plus 1 is -5. But because you multiply by 2, we have to divide both of these numbers by 2. Okay, so yes, 2 does divide by -6, so this becomes an x minus 3 factor from here. And no, 2 does not divide 1, so there's your 2x plus 1 factor from there. So our quadratic of 2x squared minus 5x minus 3 factors to x minus 3 times 2x plus 1. Okay, and then our third factor comes from your solution. So we need to change this into an x minus 2, and you got 1 point for doing all of that work. Factoring your quadratic and then bringing down your 0, right, as a factor. So there's lots of ways that we can factor quadratics. That is but one of the ways. Okay, find the values, and when you say values, we're talking about intervals. Find the intervals where g of x is less than or equal to 0. So we're looking for where is the graph below the x-axis, or where do we get negative numbers on a sign analysis. Okay, so we're going to do a number line sign analysis and remind you of what that means. So first of all, we need some numbers, right, our zeros, in order to do this. So we get our zeros from your factors. So we have a positive 3, 0 from our x minus 3 factor. We have a negative 1/2, 0 from your 2x plus 1 factor, and we have an x equals 2, 0 from your x minus 2 factor. So we put these three numbers on here as your interval. So now we have intervals. We have the interval less than negative 1/2. We have an interval between negative 1/2 and 2. We have an interval between 2 and 3. And we have the interval from 3 on to infinity. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick ourselves some numbers. Maybe -1 would be a nice number. That's less than 1/2. And we're going to plug it into here and see whether we get a positive number or a negative number. Okay, so -1 minus 3 is clearly a negative number. -1 times 2 plus 1 is also a negative number, right? -2 plus 1 is -1. And -1 minus 2 is a negative number. So on the left, we're going to get a negative value. Okay, so we get a negative to the left of -1/2. Negative times a negative times a negative is a negative. So here's one of our solutions. Everything less than -1/2. Okay, so let's try something in here. How about 0? 0 sounds good. 0 minus 3 is a negative. 2 times 0 plus 1 is a positive. And 0 minus 2 is a negative. A negative times a positive times a negative is a positive. Okay, there's your sign analysis. We are analyzing whether it's positive or negative. Okay, let's try a 2.5. That's in between 2 and 3. 2.5 minus 3 is a negative. 2 times 2.5 is 5. 5 plus 1 is a positive. 2.5 minus 2 is a positive. So a negative times a positive is a negative. Okay, so here's another solution set that we want in between here and here, because these are all negative values and we want negative values. And then if we try something bigger than 3, like 5, let's see what happens there. So everything greater than 5 is going to be a positive value also. Okay, so you got a point for getting your solutions. You got a point for your analysis, right? All of this work needed to be on there if you were going to get a point for that. And then you got a point for your solution. So we have from negative infinity to negative 1/2 with a bracket, because it says or equal to 0. And then we have another solution from 2 to 3. Right? These are intervals where your graph is negative. Okay, so what values means all of the intervals that we have. Okay, so that was what you needed to do on your free response portion of your polynomial quiz to get all 11 points possible. Okay, that's all. Goodbye.